Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're going to get started now. Betsy, take us away.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for CyberSecure, a virtual cybersecurity workshop for utilities, brought to you by 7 States Power. As Dave mentioned, my name is Betsy Kirk McCall, and it's nice to see all of you virtually this morning. Today, you will learn how to assess your power company's risks and proactively defend distribution systems and assets against cybersecurity threats by leveraging resources available to you. This workshop is being presented in partnership with Intuitive, APPA, NRECA, and Axio. Your registration includes free access to APPA's scorecard and NRECA's RC3 cybersecurity self-assessment tools during the month of September. You will learn how to access both of these tools. Let's take a quick look at the workshop agenda. Beginning at 9 a.m., we start the morning with a cybersecurity awareness presentation and video, exploring the connection to utilities and renewables presented by Intuitive. At 9:45, we'll move into an introduction of the APPA and NRECA cybersecurity assessment tools, followed by a live demonstration of both assessment tools by Axio. We'll take a short break from 10:30 until 11 o'clock, resuming promptly at 11 a.m. Eastern Time for a deep dive on both the APPA and NRECA assessment tools. We'll follow the workshop with open Q&A for anyone who would like to submit any questions or have discussions about anything that you've learned today in the workshop. Let's move into meeting our presenters for today. Our first presenter, Chuck Speaks, is a senior advisor with Intuitive Research and Technology Corporation based out of Huntsville, Alabama, where he leads cyber, software, IT, and intelligence initiatives. He's going to set the stage for us with regard to cybersecurity as it relates to specifically the unique challenges of the public utility industry and how we as that industry can increase our cyber posture. Nathan Mitchell is the Senior Director of Cyber and Physical Security Services for the American Public Power Association, APPA, in Arlington, Virginia. Nathan is a registered professional engineer and has a wealth of power system operations and cybersecurity experience. Before joining APPA, he served as electric distribution manager overseeing utility operations and construction for the city of Naperville, Illinois. He will be providing a review of APPA's current cybersecurity program portfolio, including the Cybersecurity Scorecard, Incident Response Playbook, Regional Shared Cybersecurity Services Model, and Cybersecurity Roadmap. Cynthia Sue is the Cybersecurity Program Manager at NRECA. Her job is to create cybersecurity resources and tools that meet the needs of NRECA's members. Prior to working at NRECA, Cynthia worked for the U.S. House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology and at the U.S. Department of Energy. Cynthia will be highlighting NRECA's RC3 cybersecurity program, including the RC3 cybersecurity self-assessment, tabletop exercises, cybersecurity guidebook series, and a new program titled Managing Cybersecurity Risk in Distributed Energy Resources. And Dave White is president and co-founder at Axio. He has led cybersecurity assessments for more than 100 companies, including many utilities. Dave remains involved in critical infrastructure cybersecurity throughout thought leadership. He is currently serving in a leadership role in the development of C2M2 version 2 and is a frequent speaker at board meetings, conferences, and other events. Dave will be providing an interactive demonstration of the APPA scorecard and NRECA RC3 cybersecurity self-assessments, followed by an interactive deep dive session for each of the tools. Let's move into a few tips and tricks for today's workshop to ensure that you get the most out of the time you're spending with us this morning. We encourage you to ask questions during the webinar by clicking the Q&A icon, not the chat icon, but the Q&A icon in the Zoom interface. Participants will be muted to minimize sound interference. Panelists will post some information in chat, and attendees will not be able to post messages in chat. Instead, again, please use the Q&A function in Zoom to ask questions or post comments. This webinar will be recorded, and a copy of the audio and video recording will be available on NRECA's RC3 website. In the event of technical difficulty, please rejoin using the same connection information, and we will resume the webinar as soon as possible. And now, let's get started with Chuck Speaks of Intuitive Research and Technology. Welcome, Chuck.
Thank you, Betsy. I appreciate it. And thanks to Seven States for bringing us on this workshop, and to the attendees, we appreciate your time today. It's going to be an exciting workshop. We've gone through this a couple of times with our presenters. It's really going to be a very informative and exciting presentation. So thank you for your time, Seven States and Betsy. We appreciate you allowing us to join. So let us jump right into the presentation because our time is sort of short. Just really quickly, a little bit about us. Intuitive, we're here in Huntsville, Alabama. Been in the area for 21 years now. We are a aerospace, defense, technical and engineering firm based in Huntsville with locations throughout. We tend to work with commercial, government, regulated industries. We provide cybersecurity services to all those entities. We focus all the way from your traditional enterprise IT cybersecurity all the way out to the edge, whether that be edge from an industrial control perspective or to the tactical edge when you talk about military. We are obviously tightly integrated with the communities we serve. We live and work here in Huntsville and in the communities where we put down roots, and we've done so for the past 21 years. My role here at Intuitive, as Betsy mentioned, is to cover software, cyber, intel initiatives across all industries. Been doing this for about 20 years now, which is scary, but about 20 years in IT and cyber ops and leadership. I'm currently on the Cyber Huntsville Board of Directors as a Vice President, and I'm also a partner on the FBI's National Defense Cyber Alliance based out of Redstone Arsenal here in Huntsville. So it's an exciting time to be in this area. It's an exciting time to be in cyber, so we appreciate your time. So let's move on to public utility cybersecurity. Take us to the next slide. So far, public utilities has been growing as far as who are stakeholders from a utility perspective. We have obviously the core customers, residential, business, industry, but what we're seeing is a more tightly integrated customer set. So and the emergence of compliance and regulation in your industry. So that goes beyond just the federal initiatives that we hear so much about. But it's getting pushed down to the local and state level from federal initiatives. So obviously regulation from that perspective, regulation of customer data is actually kind of growing in this space. So our traditional set of stakeholders in public utilities is growing. The interconnectedness of our grid also impacts a lot of things that we're seeing, especially with the advent of COVID and that type of thing. So we have a lot of reliance from hospital systems and even military installations. I'm looking out my back window at Redstone Arsenal here, who's doing a lot of work with TVA and member institutions to make sure that their power needs are met for a growing mission. So as we see, the number of stakeholders that rely on utilities and work with utilities is expanding pretty rapidly. So what does that mean? So with the growing number of stakeholders means we have a growing infrastructure. You have your traditional enterprise IT, of course, that powers not only the business of utilities, but also the infrastructure that it supports. But as you move away from the core IT that might be in your data center that supports your infrastructure out towards the edge, you have your more operational technology, and that's where we see industrial control systems, SCADA systems, more specialized IT. While it's powering things that are utility specific, it still is IT. In this case, it's OT. So you have a very diverse technology footprint that's tending to get spread out further and further to your edge. Then with the advent of some new technologies, such as e-meters or smart meters. You've got renewables such as EV chargers, solar panels, distributed energy systems. Those tend to have more of an exponential impact on your critical infrastructure due to the bidirectional nature of communications. So we'll talk about that in a couple of slides later on, but for your infrastructure perspective, it's tending to grow even larger. The footprint is larger, and how it communicates back and forth with your core network and your utility partners is actually growing quite large. If we move to our next slide, we see that with that expanded threat surface comes risk. So utilities have always been a target of opportunity, if you would, for some types of cyber activity, whether they be criminals or otherwise, for several reasons. One, it's a target that produces a significant service to its customers, right? So what we have are if you're providing electricity and water and gas to your members, then obviously that's a critical part of their day-to-day lives. But beyond the core services provided by utility, there's also the fact that utilities house a lot of data about their customers specifically. You've got credit card information, payment information, whether they be bank drafts, and then you have obviously information on how to access IT and OT systems. So there's just a wealth of data, customer data, PII, PCI, in this being protected by utilities. So you've got customer data, you've got employee data, in some cases you have partner data, in addition to the core services that are provided. From a cyber perspective, recent studies have shown that a breach of data across the industry is about $3.8 million per breach to clean it up. And it's an aggregate $400 billion in global impact. So you see a significant impact from an incident perspective, but how it impacts globally as we aggregate cyber exposure through utilities and other industries. Take it to our next slide. So what we see right now is, especially from utilities, we see several different profiles of threats, and it typically can be bucketed into three. You typically have straight up cyber criminals, and those are mostly motivated by financial crime. So those are the ones you see very publicly right now that are phishing attacks, for instance. So we've seen a lot of that going on right now with local, state, especially. And the end result for that, what they're motivated by, is just payoff. They're not really interested in shutting down your grid. They're not really super interested in actually selling your customer data. It's really just to get to a point where you guys will pay them a ransom, if you will, to pay them off so they won't do such a thing. How they go about doing that, you'll see that through, like I said, phishing emails, fraudulent invoices. Another interesting one is gift card scams. All those types of things tend to be the purview of the cyber criminal. And really, at the end of the day, they're just really looking to seek sensitive data that they can threaten to sell on the dark web to other hackers. If you move from left to right, you have another category called hacktivists. And those are really nuisance hackers, is what I would like to call them. What they're looking for is just a very public event. They want to deface websites. They want to just make it very loud, very noticeable. They may have a specific beef or axe to grind with their targets. So they really don't have an intent to get a payoff. They're not really looking for a long-term hit. What they are looking for is embarrassment. They want to deface your website. They want to deny service to your site. They want to leak perhaps private or data or any type of data that was intended not for public release, perhaps meeting minutes or emails, that type of stuff, to the public for embarrassment purposes. And that's just really what they're about, is gaining attention for whatever cause they happen to have at this point in time. And then what you have for the last thing is the more nefarious ones, the nation state actors. And we have Vlad here, who's representative of our nation state actor, their MO is very quiet. They want to be noticed, and that's their intent. They're the ones who are to try to get into your systems and dwell for months, if not years. What they're doing is mapping your systems, understanding how it works, and laying groundwork for a potential eventual attack. They may never pull that trigger, but they may never do whatever it is they want to do. But what they are doing is laying the groundwork. If a certain criteria is met, then they can go live and destroy or deny utility services to your customers. These are what we call advanced persistent threats, or APTs, and they're the ones that we spend the vast majority of our time tracking down, profiling, and hunting during our day-to-day. Take us to our next slide. So again, the target of opportunity of utilities is actually a target of opportunity and design, as we previously mentioned. You look at the smash and grabs, is kind of what I was talking about previously. You have all the data on your customers. I know Huntsville Utilities has all my data, for instance. So socials, my bank information, address, all the kind of stuff that you really don't want leaked out to the public, but as a critical provider of service, those entities tend to have that type of information. So you have those targets of opportunity, the smash and grabs, and then you have those opportunities that are by design, right? Which is I'm laying the groundwork for a potential devastating attack should we get into conflict with somebody who is a nation state actor, or they happen to be an organization that's not necessarily directly tied to that nation, but are for service. So we see incidents where you have hacking groups for rent that are actually doing things for actual nation states. So you might say, and we'll just go ahead and call them out. Our typical adversaries in this space are Russia, North Korea, etc. Some of those folks are directly tied to those entities, but we're often seeing times where they're actually renting out specialized hacking groups that know a lot about utilities and industrial control systems. So they may not be on the direct payroll of those entities, but they are rented out. So targets of design. Next slide. So our main tactics, this is what we see a lot. So it's basically the 80-20 solution, right? So the most things that we're going to see from a utility threat tactic perspective is you see a lot of phishing, and it's not specific to utilities. We see it a lot here. So we have to design our email systems to be pretty resilient to detecting some of that stuff. But we also have to educate our users to make sure that we're really conscious about emails that are suspicious, but two, are unsolicited. So we have to do a lot of training for our folks to make sure, hey, don't just click that link, hover over it, see what it looks like, be able to recognize legitimate URLs versus, hey, this looks like it came from one of my partners, but it's actually providing a link out to some weird website. So that is the number one way that folks are getting into systems today and delivering malware. And that goes for all three of those threat types. The cyber criminals, the hacktivists, and the nation state actors, they're all using phishing to deliver malware to get into the systems. And then you have things such as reconnaissance, and we'll talk about reconnaissance here in a couple of slides as well. But reconnaissance is just surveying what is seen out there on the internet or accessible. That's the type of threat tactic that is used primarily by nation state actors, but that's something we'll talk about here in a second. Stolen credentials. So out there on the dark web, we see dumps of credentials all the time that are username passwords that are used throughout multiple email accounts or account credentials. You'll see that all the time, and criminals will use a brute force type attack to download those millions of stolen credentials and bang them against your system just to see if they hit. And then finally, you have vulnerabilities. So the last line of defense, once you do all this reconnaissance, is to do a mapping of what you have going on out there, what's identifiable from the public internet, and then map those against known vulnerabilities and misconfigurations. Is there a known patch that hasn't been applied to a certain system? So all of those are tactics for adversaries to get into utility systems, whether they be IT or operational technology. So one of the more interesting ways of doing surveillance, reconnaissance, and planning of attacks is through just public searching. So for instance, there's the website Shodan, which is pretty interesting little site. I actually use it quite a bit when we're doing our activities on the defense side. It allows us to go out there and search the internet for internet connected devices, regardless of what they are, to see what kind of ports, if they're open to the internet, are they using default username passwords. Those are super chatty. They'll basically tell anybody anything that wants to introspect them. So if I ping a certain system, or if I try to connect to a certain system, some of these things will put a banner up and tell me all about it, what version it's running, that type of thing. And then you have some actually more not nefarious, but more wide open systems. So you see a map of the industrial control systems that Shodan has identified in the background. Those are all ICS systems that are open to the internet. Some of that is on purpose. A lot of it's through misconfiguration. So you can see that it's actually a big deal out there that industrial control systems are open to the internet. Some of them are using standard username passwords. Some are weak. And some are operating with old versions of operating systems or unpatched systems. What you do get is that image on the right-hand side, which is a screenshot of an industrial control system that was wide open to the internet using remote desktop. So what we were able to see here is anybody that has access to Shodan could go in there, grab this thing, and if they wanted to, control the system. So there is a high degree of risk here when you have misconfigurations from an industrial control perspective. So this is one of the main ways that adversaries go about mapping systems, but it's also a way that we go out there and actually identify systems so we can better defend networks. Next slide. So we talked about your traditional IT and OT systems and utility, but what we have is, we talked about previously, was that expanding threat service, especially with renewables, advanced metering systems, the DERMS, distributed energy systems, smart consumer IoT devices that are now in homes, and even EV chargers. A lot of this requires a lot of bidirectional communication between the systems themselves, from the consumer side, from the utility installed, to whatever these EV chargers that are sitting out there in the public. But a lot of them actually require bidirectional communication back to the utility. This requires a couple of things, right? So it requires us to open up holes in our network to allow this communication. And oftentimes that can be done safely, but through no fault of somebody else, they can be misconfigured. And what that does is immediately opens up a hole. So it was best described to me when I first got into cybersecurity, is that defenders have to be right all the time, right? An adversary only has to be right once. So if a mispatch is done, if a zero-day event is not detected, and mitigation is not rolled out, then what we have is that expanded threat surface is now a hole, and is allowed folks into my core utility system. And if there's a connected system back up to, say, in this case, TVA or whoever's actually generating power, then we even have a bigger problem, because network hopping is a big deal when you talk about hacking or cybersecurity in this area. Additional issues with this type of thing is what we have are all these systems are made primarily by different companies. So you have multiple types of protocols and integration styles that need to be done. So as well as automation. So that makes the job of defending these types of systems even harder. When you tend to focus on your core IT and operational technology, those are things we can kind of control a little bit better. We understand the port protocols and the systems a little bit better. There are major players in this market. But when we start expanding our threat surface through IoT devices in our consumers' homes and EV chargers that pop up and AMSs, we have to expand our knowledge of what they are, how they communicate, how they integrate, and then how do we defend all those? So that bridging of the operational network with the enterprise network with net new ports and protocols and integrations becomes a challenge, if you will. So from recent incidents that we've been tracking, of course, we see this all over the place. The news is pretty loud about some of this stuff. I have talked to our partners over at the FBI who have given us some information that we can release publicly. But suffice to say, there have been some local municipality ransomware incidents that we won't name specifically, but they've been in the news. In most cases, hackers have dwelled for quite some time, weeks if not months. What they're doing is making sure that they can encrypt all the data, exfiltrate all the data, and you can see that ransomware payments can be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's just a game where they're rolling a dice to see if they'll get a payout or not. Most often they're exfiltrating your data as collateral. So what they'll most often do is send you a subset of the data that they've collected just to prove that they did what they said they did, and give you a handful of days to respond. If you don't, they're going to dump it out on the public internet for others to take advantage of. From a national perspective, what we have seen is where the FBI got involved. We saw dozens of utilities, mostly from the northeastern corridor through the Midwest towards Washington, Oregon, that were tracking nation states that were targeting local utilities and co-ops that happened to be adjacent to larger critical infrastructure. We had junctions, dams, locks, etc. And what they were doing was picking on some of the smaller utilities, smaller co-ops that had some sort of one-hop type connectivity to some of this connected critical infrastructure, looking to see if they could just hop into those adjacent critical infrastructure. And that was a large effort that the FBI tracked for months, and pretty sure that they've gotten rid of it, but it's one of those things that was ongoing for quite some time. Again, we talked about it previously, but phishing was the main technique. This wasn't a thing where you had folks going out there and downloading malware on their own. Malware was sent across an email, and the way that they did it was they emulated a trusted connection. So a partner that utility or those co-ops were used to dealing with emulated an email from them, and then included a malicious URL, which then delivered the malware through a phishing technique. And that was the way they got into most of these places. And the way this was discovered actually was actually a co-op that was taking a look at this, and they actually saw it and reported it to the FBI. So that's how that got resolved. So what we have also is this last one, which is a different type of attack, but again, it was a nation state actor trying to gain, again, by trusted connections. It's a sophisticated attack. They were using multiple methods. But the thing that was interesting about the Russia attack here was they were using not phishing, but a water hole attack. And what they had done was they actually infiltrated a website that tended to serve utilities in a certain area. And they delivered their malware by hacking that website. So any user that connected to that website would be delivered malware, which then opened up a backdoor, so they were able to access systems through a water hole attack. So you see multiple ways that sophisticated cyber adversaries can get into systems and what their typical goals are. Next slide. That's a lot. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge for anybody. So I've done this for, like I said, for 20 years, from Fortune 500s all the way through the military. And it's a challenge for anybody to defend, but it's especially a big challenge for public utilities, specifically because there's challenges around a lack of budget. It's hard to staff. I will tell you that it's hard to staff even in a good location that has a lot of these folks skilled up. We're constantly recruiting and retaining our folks because it's an in-demand skill. So it's actually difficult for smaller entities to staff up skilled cyber professionals, even if they did have the budget. And once they have all that, there's a bunch of tools and procedures that are necessary to build this platform. So visibility into your entire infrastructure is difficult. So public utilities actually do face a significant challenge when it comes to building out an actual response to this. Although they've done a fantastic job so far, because there are very few instances where utility service has yet been shut down for cyber attack. So for a utility to actually go about doing this, you have to have a next generation cybersecurity solution. Again, what we're trying to do is limit the number of folks that have to do this from a cyber perspective, but to embrace cyber automation. But also with this expanding threat landscape, cyber test and evaluation engineering, because what you have now is, we talked about the renewables and the EV chargers and that type of thing. We have to understand from a teardown analysis, and so oftentimes from a installation perspective, how do we go about ensuring the security of the hardware? Because pick on an EV charger for a moment. It's sitting out there on the sidewalk or in a gas station or wherever, always open to the public. So those are oftentimes going to be a target for someone to go in there and put something nefarious in there. So you see the correlation is gas station or ATM credit card sliders. Oftentimes folks will go in there and insert a chip that's actually that's actually skimming the numbers off of the card or reading your PIN number, whatever. Similar things can occur when we distribute hardware out to the field, where we might have EV chargers that are just plugging into somebody's device or somebody's car. Similar things need to be done. So we have an expanding challenge from IT/OT cybersecurity, which is more traditional, to this cyber engineering, where I've got more hardware to defend that's now out in my footprint. So components of a professional cyber organization. So this is what it looks like when we're building out cyber ops. You have what you can think of. You have your skilled cyber professionals up there that tend to operate in the security operations center or not. It doesn't necessarily have to be a physical presence like what we have here, but a virtual SOC often gets the job done. The tools that are required. So we have tools such as threat hunting, security monitoring, or SIM tool. Then we have tools like at the bottom left, which is NIST, where we're tracking threat information and correlating it. So we get information from paid threat feeds, open source intelligence, FBI, whoever. But we'll get information on threats that come into us, and we'll combine that with what we're watching on our own networks and see if we can correlate any activity on our network versus what threat intelligence is telling us out there in the field. And that often pays dividends because we're integrated with our utility partners, our FBI partners, whoever's providing us intelligence on cyber activity at the time. And then we have in that bottom right where we're doing our own threat intelligence. So this is a screen grab off of a dark web hacker forum where we would spend a good bit of time actually going out there and proactively looking for data spillages that reference any of our customers, any of your data, anything in the utility space that might kind of leak over into our area. So we're always doing our own threat intelligence out there, where we actually will develop our own hacker personas, if you will, and troll those websites on our own looking for intelligence. Next slide. All right, so what does this shared cybersecurity platform look like? So with the partnering with 7 states, Intuitive and 7 states have come up with a sort of a shared approach to how a utility or a group of utilities will go about solving this problem. And there are certain core tenets or core activities that need to be accomplished that we've talked about kind of previously. But you want to be able to discover and document all your technology assets. We need to be able to assess our current vulnerabilities, actively hunt for threats, protect against all the malware, ransomware, perform incident response if necessary, and support our current and future compliance requirements that just keeps increasing that we have to report up through our local, state, and federal government partners. But all these things have to come together in one, but they also have to be it needs to be financially doable for a local utility or co-op, and it needs to be something that can be expanded and modular in approach. So it doesn't need to be a big bang solution for everybody, but it does need to be something that is affordable and can be rolled out to from the smallest utilities up to the largest, more mature cyber operations. Next slide. So how do we roll something like this out? So let's just focus on the 7 states footprint for a moment. So there's 133 members in 7 states, in the footprint of 7 states. So what this looks like is almost like if you think about an electric co-op for providing utilities for customers, it's the same way for a cyber service. So by banding together multiple utilities behind one shared platform, one shared staff, one solution, what this allows us to do is protect against all those things on the right-hand side that are trying to get at us all the time, from just the financially motivated cyber criminals all the way up through your APTs, your advanced persistent threats, nation state folks, but provide that as a shared service to members at a cost that is shared. So, for instance, if you think about all the things we see out here in the middle, and we talked about in the previous slide, it's expensive, right? So to operate a 24/7 security operations, you're looking at a minimum 10, 12 people to run 24/7. That's expensive. The tools then have to be installed and configured and dialed in. So it's a daunting task for someone to do individually, but in the aggregate, as a shared service, it makes a lot of sense. So if we can provide all the things that we're talking about, all the things that we need to provide robust security, but in a shared manner, that's a fantastic way that we can overcome those 3 challenges we talked about. Budget, again, it's a much lower cost of entry. 2, staffing. The individual utilities and co-ops don't have to go about doing their own staffing. That's handled by the shared service. And 3, you start gaining that visibility that you currently lack into your IT, OT, and expanding renewables footprint. So all of that can be provided in a shared manner and overcome some of those challenges that are pretty unique to the utility space. Next slide. So what do we get all this? Lower costs, we talked about that, lower staffing requirements, much lower risk, while increasing our cyber capabilities, compliance, which we're always worried about, and then obviously cyber resiliency. And that's really the goal, right? We want to drive down the costs of doing all this, reduce our risk while making sure that, one, we're compliant with all the things we need to be compliant on, but doing the things that we need to do from a cyber hygiene perspective to make sure that we present a prickly target. I mean, the thing that we talk about in this industry is there's never going to be a time where you're 100% locked down. I don't care who you are. But what you want to be able to present is what I call a prickly target, right? So a lot of these guys are looking for target of opportunity or the easiest thing or the low-hanging fruit. If you provide a prickly enough target where it's just too hard, it's too time-consuming, it's too costly for them to continue to go after you, then what they do is they'll move on to the next target. We want to make sure that you're the prickliest of targets, and they move on to the next thing. So at the same time, we're watching them at all times to understand how they are trying to get at you, and then share that information with our utility partners in the footprint to make sure that everybody else in our area is aware of what's going on, what we're seeing, so they can be more aware of what's going on in their space as well. Next slide. All right, so just in summary, again, you guys, local power companies, co-ops, unique challenges, we talked about that previously, and that's because you guys provide a critical core service to everybody. And I'd like to thank you for providing the utilities that we have right now that you can see this. We got lights and AC, thankfully, so we appreciate that, and that's something that impacts us on a day-to-day basis. It's a thing where we think we can solve a challenge. There is that concept of mutual aid in the utility space where, a hurricane rolls through. I saw it this past year down in Florida, where we were seeing trucks roll from all over the southeast to assist in response. So it's one of those things that there is a concept of mutual aid in utilities, and this is what I would deem essentially a cyber mutual aid type of a program where we band together in our time of need. And we can solve problems together. This shared approach significantly reduces your costs and staffing challenges, and it protects the IT and OT incidents while making sure that you remain compliant with the folks that you got to report up to. Next slide. All right, so what we have is we're going to do a quick little video that 7 States and Intuitive put together. We'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about how you guys can talk about it later.
Public utility information technology is a robust, complex, and distributed infrastructure that encompasses everything from business systems to operational technology that literally keeps the lights on for millions of people. With advances in distributed power generation, such as solar and wind, as well as connected Internet of Things devices, the systems that make up our national grid have grown significantly and are as technologically diverse as they are distributed. For many years, the nation's critical infrastructure has been a target of our cyber adversaries. For the most part, these threats can be put into 3 categories. Nuisance hackers, or hacktivists, who are usually looking to gain notoriety or attention for a specific cause. Criminals looking for money via identity theft, fraudulent payments, or ransomware attacks. And nation-state actors who silently gather intelligence on the operations of our critical infrastructure for future attacks or intellectual property theft. While the tactics and motives of various cyber threat actors differ, utilities must be vigilant to protect their infrastructure from attack. A robust cybersecurity program requires skilled operators and an integrated stack of sophisticated tools. The key is to build a solution that can adapt as our adversaries evolve. The challenge to implementing a dedicated program like this boils down to 2 things: money and the availability of skilled cybersecurity professionals, both of which are often out of reach for most local utilities. Yet, according to industry estimates, including insurer Lloyd's of London, the cost of doing nothing far outweighs the investment in prevention. To overcome the numerous challenges of establishing our own individual cybersecurity services, we have developed a shared grid cyber protection program that will offer enterprise-grade services at a significantly lower cost, and without the need to recruit and retain skilled staff. This grid cyber protection program is tailor-made for our unique industry requirements and built with best-in-class tools and processes. Our shared platform and services will assess your current vulnerabilities, monitor your information and operational technology systems 24/7, actively hunt for threats, protect against malware, ransomware, and phishing attempts, perform incident response with forensics capabilities when bad things do happen, even support your current and future compliance and reporting requirements. As this is a collaborative and learning platform, it will be continuously improving itself using indicators of compromise from not only our peer utilities, but also from global threat feeds and sensors. Together, through the Grid Cyber Protection Program, we will increase our cybersecurity posture, reduce our risk of cyber attacks and data breaches while overcoming the funding and staffing challenges of going alone. It's a time-tested model we value. It's a problem we can solve together. Let's get started.
All right. Thanks. Okay, well, we've wrapped up this section. I do want to put up the contact slide right here. But this is a great way for you guys to get in touch with us through 7 States for more information. We're happy to talk to you guys individually or do a deeper dive on a certain subject, whatever you need. With that, my time is done. I'll hand it over to Betsy, and I appreciate your time and hope you all have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Chuck. We certainly appreciated your presentation and video as well. As a reminder, today's workshop is being recorded, and the video along with the presentation materials will be available on 7 States website in a few days. Give us about a week or so that we can get everything posted to the website, but we'll certainly send out an email announcement to all of today's participants, letting you know where you can access a copy of today's workshop as well. Additionally, contact information for all of our speakers and presenters will be available at the end of the workshop today as well. And now I'll turn it over to Nathan Mitchell to introduce the Public Power Cybersecurity Scorecard.
Thanks, and thanks, Betsy. Really appreciate you inviting APPA to present today, and I look forward to the discussion as we go throughout the morning. Just a quick overview. American Public Power Association developed a cybersecurity services program utilizing a grant cooperative agreement from Department of Energy. And I'm just going to go through quickly the basics of what we've developed through that program. Next slide. Just an overview of the cooperative agreement. In 2016, APPA partnered with DOE on this program. They put in $7.5 million for the 3-year agreement, and gave us a list of tasks that they would like for us to cover. The first part was to analyze and collect data about public power utilities, and then develop the resources that would be scaled for public power and the municipal structure. And then come up with a sustainability model that can carry this program on through the years. Next slide. Really, the goal of the whole program was to develop a culture of cybersecurity for public power utilities. APPA was strategically situated to engage with a number of our members. We cover over 2,000 municipal utilities across the country, from scales from Department of Water and Services of Los Angeles through the smallest of utilities. So we had to scale the program that we were developing. But the task that we were assigned was to do cybersecurity risk assessments, on-site cyber vulnerability assessments, and then pilot some existing and emerging security technologies, all to improve how we communicate cyber threats among our members. Thank you. Next slide. A little bit about APPA itself. We have a number of activities that we do for our members. Like I said, we're trying to cover all the public power utilities across the country. Most of those are really small utilities, under 2,000 meters is our median size. But we're set up at APPA to provide the services that our members need, to educate policymakers in Congress, White House, federal agencies, but also support our member through operations. We have a number of services that we provide on the operations side, including the cyber and physical security services. And we also provide conferences and summits that help our members out in all of the facets of operations. And I just want to highlight that we are having a cybersecurity virtual summit in November that is going to go into details on a number of cyber topics, and with a great lineup of speakers. Next slide. So like I said at the beginning, we had to do a quick assessment of what is public power. In Washington, D.C., I think that Chuck put it in his slide. There was one quote from Senator Angus King of the next Pearl Harbor will be a cyber attack. In Washington, D.C., that's what they see as the challenge. They see all of the threats that are going on, and they look at the smaller utilities and say they're not defended, they're not doing anything on cybersecurity. How can we help them? Well, their first tool they use is legislation. They come up with rules and laws to make sure that this doesn't happen. Well, it's still, cyber attacks still happen. So what they take next is into regulation. We do have regulation or standards that utilities are supposed to follow, and that covers, the bulk electric system. But as you can see from our demographics, we have only about 250 of the public power utilities that are NERC registered entities. So, they look at the small entities and say, well, what can we do, for them? And so we said, well, let us break it down to you so that you can understand what's important for our members. And we really pulled out that about 750 of the 2,000 public power utilities have industrial control systems. So let's focus on them. Let's not forget about the small entities. We have 1,200 out there that do still need the help, but it's more of the basic cybersecurity help, to protect against ransomware and things like that. So, as we break this down and show legislators that, we don't need new regulations, we don't need, more legislation. We just need to help out those entities that are out there and scale the solutions to their problems. Let's not make a huge infrastructure and something that is going to cost so much money to cover. Let's get it down to the scale that members can use. Next slide. So what we did, we surveyed our members and asked them what is the biggest challenge you're having on cybersecurity, and what they told us was we really don't understand what the problem is and what the solution is. What you keep on sending us threat information. Chuck did a great job of laying out all of the threats that are happening around the world and coming in from all directions. And they said, okay, we get the threat. We see our other peers getting hit with ransomware. What can we do about it? Tell us what to do. And there are books and resources out there to tell people what to do, but it's thousands and thousands of pages and many years of education that you had to get to understand what those thousands of pages say. So we had to get it down to foundational practices. So what we did was we developed a cybersecurity scorecard that started with the basics. Let's get to those first parts, and the simple parts first. Let's not try and boil the ocean. Let's not try and build the greatest cybersecurity program without hitting the basics. So we have now Dave's going to cover the cybersecurity scorecard in detail. We've got 338 utilities out there using this scorecard right now to do a self-assessment, and they've gotten back to us and they said this is really useful and a good first step that gives us something that we can actually do. It's actionable and gives us a report at the end. Next slide. So they asked us, well, what do we do now that we've done the self-assessment? Well, we said, okay, let's come up with a roadmap and help utilities along the way. And so we developed through our member teams, we developed a cybersecurity roadmap advisory council, which we call the CRAC team. They helped us to develop a roadmap for taking the next step on cybersecurity. And so, with that, we had a good handle on, what a utility would do next. And they, our members got back to us again. They said, we need more help. Who can we turn to help actually or have us help do these things that are in the roadmap? Well, we have a Joint Action Agency Advisory Council that pulled together a regional shared cybersecurity services model. And we've got that model that we can share. However, 7 states is doing a fantastic job by laying out their program. That's exactly what our members said that is needed. You guys are going in the right direction. Please utilize the services that are being developed here to help you out on your journey. Next slide. And we understood that eventually someone is going to get hacked, and something is going to go wrong. So we needed to have some sort of guidance for our members to respond and recover from a cyber incident. So we developed our cyber incident response playbook, and I've got the URL there to download it and be shared later on. Please utilize this resource, co-op, muni, whoever, it has great, resources and a way to set up your cyber incident response playbook and scale it to your organization. If you have a playbook already, review this one and compare it to your existing response. But know that there's help out there. We hope that you will go to 7 states first if you do have a problem and need some help locally. But if it does get out of control and we have multiple utilities that need help, there is a network out there of cyber mutual assistance that can be brought in to help multiple utilities out. Next slide. But there's also a number of resources that we have developed through this program. We have cybersecurity training. That's the APPA's forte. We provide training to our members on a number of topics. We will bring the cyber training to you. Please reach out to us if you want more information. And then the security information sharing. We're developing a weekly situation report that we send out to our members through our security listserv. A digest of all those threats on a weekly basis. We hope that you can plug into that resource and utilize it. Next slide. And of course, please reach out to me if you have any questions, or you can send us an email request through cybersecurity@publicpower.org. We're here to help, whatever we can do. But I look forward to the rest of the discussion and the deep dive on the 2 tools that we have available to members. And now I'll turn it back to Betsy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nathan. And now I'll turn it over to Cynthia Sue to introduce the NRECA RC3 Cybersecurity Self-Assessment. Cynthia?
Thank you, Betsy. And it's great following Chuck and Nathan, because you guys have given a really great introduction. So let me talk a little bit about, next slide, NRECA. For those of you who might not be familiar with NRECA, this is a map of our service area for our co-ops. So while there are maybe 900 co-ops, we serve more than 50% of the nation in terms of delivering electricity. And if you go to the next slide, we have quite a bit of resources on distributed energy. So if you're looking, this will be you'll have these slide decks, so I'm not going to walk through all of this, but because this is a focus on DER and cybersecurity, I wanted to touch a few things that we do in DER. So whether it's distributed generation or storage, demand response, electric vehicles, Chuck mentioned, all of these technologies that are going into our systems have a potential two-way flow, which both can open up the attack surface, but also is an opportunity to improve the cybersecurity of the technologies during the installation, build, and development process. So next slide. So let me focus a little bit on cybersecurity and NRECA. This is a key concept we have, that security is a process. So it's not something you're going to go out, buy. It's a one-time, you're done, you've got a product, you're good to go. It's really a people, process, technology. And I would say that 80% of it is people and process, and maybe 20% of it is what you buy as a product. So that's the philosophy we go into when we think about how to develop cybersecurity resources for our members. So if we go to the next slide, we have a pretty broad program. A lot of our work is in research and development, and I'll talk specifically about one of the R&D technologies. Chuck mentioned Shodan. We actually have a project, go back, sorry, Dave, I'm gesticulating wildly. Chuck mentioned Shodan. We have a project with Pacific Northwest National Lab where we're trying to build a more user-friendly platform for Shodan that can do analyses and hold the results on premises instead of in the web. So there's a lot of R&D that we do. We do a lot of member engagement. I am on the road, literally and now virtually speaking. Nathan and I have been out and done joint presentations. So if you want a speaker for a workshop or a group, feel free to reach out to us. We do a lot of speaking. And then a lot of stuff in the community, whether it's the DOE's C2M2, we're revising right now, the GridX technologies. We've worked a lot with the National Guard Cyber Shield exercise. So it's a broad program. We work a lot with government relations and ENT. So next slide. Let me talk a little bit about a new research project that we're doing. This is specifically for managing cyber risk and DER, distributed energy resources. We are going to address both the risks that the DERs present to the grid, but we're also going to talk about the kinds of risks that are in the DERs themselves in terms of threats and vulnerabilities. And we're going to look at developing industry best practices and recommended solutions for some of these risks. More specifically, we're going to go pretty deep into protocols and what are some of the technical architectures that would mitigate some of the cybersecurity risks. If you're interested in partnering with us on this R&D project, please reach out to Moeen or myself, but we always try and find 7 to 8 co-ops that can help guide the research, so whatever the product is, it has the most value to our members. So we are active right now in DER cybersecurity research, so please feel free to reach out to us if you're interested in this space. So let me talk a little bit about the program that Nathan mentioned that DOE funded. DOE funded a program for both APPA and NRECA to develop tools and resources for our utilities. This is the RC3 program, the Rural Cooperative Cybersecurity Capabilities Program. I'm not going to walk through all of it. Like Nathan's, our program comes to an end this year, but let me identify 3 resources that are currently available to you if you want them. The first is a cybersecurity self-assessment. And as Betsy mentioned in the introduction, we're making this self-assessment available to you for free for a month on the Axio platform. It's a series of 133 questions that you walk through. We worked with 36 co-ops to help develop these questions. When we went out to deliver it as a facilitated, it's a 2-day, when we did it as a facilitated process, it was a 2-day process, and we required the whole leadership team to be part of that process. So the CEO, the comms people, the engineering and ops people, the IT staff, if they have IT staff, or their IT service provider, if they don't have IT staff, the person from finance. And when we did the first one of these, we got an email response back on the first day. This was from one of the CEOs that participated in helping us build it. And that sort of, we weren't sure if he was going to come back on the second day, but on the second day, this is what he said. And then we knew we had something. So the goal here is to build resources that can help a co-op or a utility. That's from our smallest utility that I'm working with has 7 staff total. We're working with utilities that are generation transmission companies. We've now got the platform on Axio. We got the self-assessment on the Axio platform, and Dave's going to do a deeper dive about that. We're opening up this license program for everyone in 7 states for the month of September. But if you're interested in participating in the program beyond September, we have an opportunity to apply for a license. And if you're interested in an ongoing license that will go through March 2022, please reach out to me. We currently have 17 members in 7 states on that. And I think one of our RC3 license program members is in the audience. And if you are and you feel like speaking about the program, please put something in the Q&A and let people know what you think about it so far. So the next tool we have available is a toolkit. Nathan mentioned you need to be able to be prepared to do things. One of the best way to prepare and stretch those muscles is to do exercises. This is a complete do-it-yourself tabletop toolkit that you can download. We go to the next slide. We've got 6 cybersecurity scenarios. We just are releasing today 3 more cybersecurity scenarios. And by the end of the year, we'll have 12 total published. It's available to download as a toolkit. It's something that you do as yourself. It's a do-it-yourself. But we're also working with Nuari and Public Power. So Nathan and I and Norwich University are going to do a very large virtual tabletop exercise that will be free. And anyone in this audience is available to participate for free on October 29th as part of National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. This will be a distributed play exercise on a virtual platform. We're pretty excited about it. So keep your eyes out. We'll be sending stuff to Betsy to send out to you, but it will be very exciting to run a national exercise. And we're scaling it for distribution co-ops So this is not necessarily a bulk electric system exercise. It's really dedicated to the distribution sector. So the third thing I want to mention is our guidebook series. This is a series of, if you think about the dummies and the idiots guides, what do these different job roles need to know about cybersecurity? Because cybersecurity isn't an IT function, right? So everybody in that co-op has a role in cybersecurity. The first guidebook we've put out is the legal one. This is available for free, and the other ones will be rolling out over the course of the year. Even if you're not an attorney, I would recommend that you take a look at this legal guidebook, because if you're in the IT world and you're trying to make an argument to your leadership about why it's important to do cybersecurity, there's a lot of language in here that talks about risk management that can help you frame what you're trying to say from a technical way into a way that the senior leadership can understand. So there's a lot of good information in here. So last, this is our team. It's come and grown, and I clearly don't do all of this by myself. Here's our website if you want to get in touch with us or find more out about our resources. And with that, I think I'm passing it back to Betsy, and she's going to lead us into the really fun stuff.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. And now I'll turn it over to Dave White of Axio for a live demonstration of these wonderful assessment tools that you have heard about from Nathan and Cynthia. Dave?
Great. Thank you, Betsy. Thank you, Cynthia, Nathan, Chuck. So I'm going to do a quick demonstration here, and we hope everyone will come back after the break that starts in 23 minutes. And we'll take a deep dive after the break. But I wanted to start just by saying that, you know, sometimes utilities are and should be concerned about using, you know, cloud-based systems or software as a service systems. We have paid a great deal of attention through both process technology, people, and architectural design of Axio 360. So if you want more information about that or need to take a deeper dive on that, we're happy to talk to you about that. Today, for this brief dive before the deep dive, I'm going to quickly compare and contrast the Public Power Cybersecurity Scorecard and the NRECA RC3 Cybersecurity Self-Assessment. Look, bottom line is I advocate that you use both of these, and I'm going to dive into them and show you how they are similar and how they are different. So first, on the left, the scorecard is 14 questions. And those 14 questions address the 51 foundational activities from the cybersecurity capability maturity model to build your cybersecurity program. If you're not familiar with C2M2, it was developed a few years ago by utilities for utilities in collaboration with the Department of Energy. And it's a great way to build a program for cybersecurity and establish your kind of battle rhythm and programmatic strength in cybersecurity. The RC3 Cybersecurity Self-Assessment is 133 specific, actionable, and early stage controls, and you can use those to formulate your cybersecurity action plan. So these are more tactical, more specific, and I think you'll see that once we jump into the instruments. And so bear with me as I go to the web. So we're going to start with the Public Power Scorecard, and to get there, and we'll cover in great detail the registration process and get everybody logged in during the deep dive. Right now, I'm just going to point out that we're going to publicpower.axio.com, and I have my credentials loaded here. I'm going to log in. And the first thing you'll see is this dashboard if you have completed a self-assessment or you've started a scorecard in the platform. This left-hand list here, so this is your dashboard. This is kind of home base. The left-hand list here is our assessments that you have access to. So the ones that have blue coloring on them are ones that you own, and ones that have green coloring on them are assessments that are owned by someone else, but they've shared them with you, and I'll cover sharing and that feature in the deep dive. What I'd like to do now is just create a new assessment. So you can click on this button at the bottom left corner of the screen where it says New Cybersecurity Scorecard to create a new scorecard. And then the only required information to create a scorecard, or really any assessment in Axio 360, is that you give it a name. And the name is, we call it scope, because we want you to, it's a tip to you to remember to name it in a way that helps you understand which part of the organization you were looking at when you did this assessment. Another tip here is that I like to use demo or test when I'm creating assessment for the purpose of demoing the features of the platform or for testing the features of the platform. That'll help you remember that this was a demo assessment, not an assessment that you built for planning and improvement. So I'm just going to say demo and today's 2018, stuck in the past. I'll name it demo with today's date. And that brings us immediately to the wizard interface. So those 14 questions from the cybersecurity scorecard are presented in a wizard view, a fast-paced, and these are the instructions. I'm not going to give you time to read those since you have me on the line for now, but just know that they're there as a way to get you started. And this is the first of 14 questions. Just notice that this is one of 14. You'll have 14 panels like this in the scorecard. We'll walk through all of them during the deep dive. And the very first one is on cyber asset inventory. Think back to Chuck's slides. One of Chuck's first recommendations in one of his summary slides was know what you're managing. So inventory is a key feature of almost every cybersecurity guideline or model or approach that you can read about. We've got to understand what we're managing. Each one of the questions in the scorecard begins with this sort of opening text in black, which frame the question. So a utility cybersecurity program needs to understand the assets that are necessary for its operation. And so understanding those assets will help us understand the target of our cybersecurity activities in the organization. And then in blue, we have the instruction, select all the responses that best describe your asset management activities. So this is a select all that apply. It's not a multiple choice question like from grade school. This is you click everything that applies, and all 14 of the questions are structured in that same way. In bold here, we say, keep in mind that the activities may be performed in an ad hoc manner. So for these basic activities from C2M2, which is the source of the cybersecurity scorecard, ad hoc counts, right? If you're getting it done because Cindy gets it done, she knows what she's doing, she shows up to work every day except when she's on vacation, and she's just making this happen. You may not have a written procedure or a policy or anything like that, but you're making it happen. That's what we mean by ad hoc. So for assets here, the first answer is we have an inventory of IT and OT assets that we need for our operation. And that includes things like computers, relays, and other devices. So I'm going to say we have that. The second answer here is we have an inventory of important data that we need for our operation, including relay settings, customer information, financial data. These are examples. So you may not have all of that data or an inventory of all of that data for every part of the organization if you're doing multiple scorecards across your utility, but I'm going to say we have that in this case. Are we logging changes to those assets? Let's say that we are. And do we evaluate or test them before we make those changes? Let's say that we are. So we've now answered the first question in the scorecard. If I clicked on E, it would clear all of these answers. And also notice this note field. A note field is a great way to jot down something about why you answered the way you did. Because trust me, I've done enough assessments that have had all of us sort of scratching our heads a few weeks later when we look back at the results saying, now, can anybody remember why exactly we answered it that way? So it's a great practice to keep some notes while you're going through it so that you can remember when you look back at it and you're using these results for planning improvements. I'm going to save that note. And then to get to the next question, we just hit the next button. But for now, I'm going to jump over to, oh, wait a second. I'm going to go back to the dashboard, which is hidden behind some Zoom controls here. And the dashboard very quickly gives you an overall score out of 300 points shown in this speedometer interface. It gives you a benchmark comparison. I'll say more about how to interpret that in the deep dive. and it gives you a score by domain. So there are 10 domains in C2M2, starting with risk management and ending with cybersecurity program management. And this is your score for the basic activities in those domains and a list of recommendations. This is an ordered list based on how you answer of what the scorecard would recommend as the next move. And each one of these recommendations has additional text and then a link to the language in the C2M2 model for how to get it done. And we'll talk more about that in the deep dive. There's also a downloadable report that you can generate. The report is beautifully formatted and shows your score and the answer to each of those 14 questions, so that you have a shareable, distributable artifact that you can use after you complete the scorecard. So let's move on to the RC3 self-assessment. And to access the RC3 self-assessment, I want you to go to nreca.axio.com. I'm going to use a different credential because I have a special demo account that's set up for a fictitious co-op utility. And so I'm using a different credential, but for your access to these assessments through the end of September, I want you to use the same credential, the same username and password to log in at both of these URLs, publicpower.axio.com and nreca.axio.com. Once again, we see a dashboard. The dashboard here looks a little bit different because the RC3 is different from the scorecard. And I'll cover all of these elements of the dashboard in great detail this afternoon. I want to just quickly point out that instead of creating a new assessment here, which I would do by clicking on this button, notice it's in the same place for the RC3 interface that it was for the scorecard interface. I can create a new assessment in the same way. But for this webinar, for this part of the webinar, I'm going to actually dwell on an RC3 self-assessment that I've already completed. So let's jump in there, and you'll see the interface for RC3. It's not a wizard format. There are 133 questions, and I can see very quickly here the structure of the RC3. RC3 is organized in 5 functions, just like the NIST cybersecurity framework, if you're familiar with that: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And each of those sections of the RC3 have a number of objectives. So we see objective 1 here, identify our cooperative cyber assets. I can also see that in the outline view in this left panel, and I can use this left panel to navigate the model, as I can also use, or the questionnaire, as I can use the section labels across the top also to navigate, and I see the structure of the RC3 is visible in the interface as I move around. So I'm going to go back to identify 1, and what you'll notice here is that identify our cooperative cyber assets, which is the very first objective in identify. I can get more information about the identify section by opening this view. And then identify 1 is an inventory objective. And remember, when you're using this RC3, it was written for, it was developed by cooperatives for cooperatives by NRECA. But if you're using it and you're not a cooperative, you should just interpret wherever you see the word co-op or cooperatives, you should replace that with utility. And if you're affiliated with a municipality and you might be using it in another part of the public services offered by the municipality, just interpret it as organization rather than cooperative. So that's just an interpretation tip for the RC3. Notice that the first question in the first objective is, do we have an inventory of all our computers? So this is a very specific question. Over in the cybersecurity scorecard, we saw a question of, do we have an inventory of all the IT and OT devices or assets that we depend on? In RC3, it goes a layer deeper. So it asks if you have an inventory of computers, and then an inventory of network equipment, and then an inventory of operational network equipment. So we actually have, in this first objective, look at that, 12 questions about inventory of hardware assets, right? So it's much more It's much finer grained. So this will give you a much more detailed view of your inventory activities. These are more fine-grained controls, and the cybersecurity scorecard are more programmatic activities. And the other thing, one of the great things about the RC3 is that all of the questions in the RC3 are worded in a way so that if you answer them no, it's clear what you need to do, right? So they're not jargony, they're not, it's very clear what the right action is if you've answered a question no and you want to move the answer to yes. To answer a question in this interface, you simply click on the answer. So I might click on and say that I have a partial inventory right now. Notice that there's also this item over here called target, and I can set a target in RC3 by holding down the shift key and then clicking on an answer. So now what I've said is that I'm answering that I currently have a partial inventory of all our computers, but my target is to move that to a hard yes, like a confident yes, in some planning horizon. Now we'll talk more about target profiles during the deep dive. It's a really good practice to set a target profile while you're doing an assessment. And a target profile is just an expression of where you want to be at some definite time in the future. A good practice is, let's set a target profile for 1 year out or 2 years out or 3 years out. I think it's good to stay within that 3-year band and sort of set the target based on what you really believe you're going to be able to do, given your resources and other circumstances in that time frame. So that's a tip for going through here as you're answering this. Go ahead and set a target. It's very helpful for planning activities. I'll talk more about the other features in the interface. For right now, I'm going to jump down to Objective 2. And Objective 2, you see here, is identify what information our cooperative stores and uses. So this entire objective is like that second answer in the first question of the scorecard. So this is about having an information asset inventory. And notice that there are questions about bank account information, personally identifiable information, credit card numbers, emails, passwords, buildings, and so forth. So notice that we have another 7 or 8 questions here on the information asset inventory. So that's a quick look at both the scorecard and the RC3. You'll notice here that for RC3, I can also produce a full report. I have one of those that I can show you. This is what the RC3 report looks like. And it's a great looking PDF that you can download. It gives you detailed scores in a couple of different dimensions for the scorecard. For now, I'm going to jump back to the dashboard, which you can get to by clicking on the dashboard button or the dashboard icon over in the left, and quickly look at the score. So for RC3, you'll see that for this demo, my current score is 336, and then the segments of this wheel provide the score for each of those sections: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Notice also that to the left, I have a score from some time in the past. In this case, it's activated for May 15th, and I have this target score for some time in the future of 418. So the dashboard, your home base, is a way to get a quick summary of your score. You might show this. Some of our users open the platform for their monthly or bi-weekly cybersecurity team meeting to take a look at how they're doing, what action items they have, what upcoming targets they have, and how their score has changed. So the best use case for using either of these self-assessments in the Axio 360 platform is to create one and then continue to work with it over time. And so you'll start to see, as you make changes, your favorable answers in the dark blue here will sort of grow to consume the lighter colors of blue as an indication of your improvement over time as you march from where you were at some point in the past toward your ultimate target for some specific date in the future. So that's a little bit about the RC3 and the cybersecurity scorecard. Remember, we're going to take a deep dive into each of these after the break. And I'm going to toss the baton now back to Betsy so that she can bring us into break.
Thank you so much, Dave. And thank you to Chuck, Nathan, Cynthia, and Dave, all of our speakers and presenters this morning for starting this workshop off and covering such valuable information that I know our members truly appreciate. As Dave mentioned, we will move into a break for 30 minutes and we'll resume at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. We encourage you to take this opportunity, take a break, grab a snack, and make sure you head back over at 11 a.m. You do not want to miss the deeper dive on these two assessment tools. Dave just hit those high level, but certainly we can walk through those with each of you or with you during the deeper dive and answer any questions you may have. So certainly want to encourage you to log back on. You can stay live on this. You do not have to disconnect and reconnect. You can just go to mute, and we'll certainly see you all back here at 11 a.m. Eastern Time to take a deeper dive on these assessment tools.